Hey guys, you're welcome back to my channel. In today's tutorial, we'll be drafting a Victorian corset, and in the process we'll learn how to move that. So I'll run through a bodice block first, and I'm creating my neckline of 3 inches depth and 3 inches width. And on my shoulder line, I've placed half of my shoulder measurement. At that point, I'll go down with 1 inch, and that will be for my shoulder slope. I'll connect that shoulder slope to my neck width. I'll go back again to my shoulder slope, and that point I will measure down half of my shoulder measurement again, and I'm getting a midpoint of that point. Now I'll connect my shoulder slope to that half of the shoulder measurement, and at that point is my chest line. I'll draw a line at that point, and then I'll extend it all the way to the center front, and that's my chest line. So I'll go back to where I marked the midpoint of my shoulder slope and chest line. I'll go inwards with half inch. So to create my arm curve, I will need to place a quarter of my bust measurements plus the sewing allowance I want to add, and I will use the cuff part of my pattern master to connect my shoulder slope to that midpoint, which I went in with half, and then I'll connect it to meet my bust measurements like so. So now, going back to my shoulder line, I will measure my bust point, the under bust, the half length, and the blouse length. So now my bust point there is 12 inches, and my under bust is 17 inches. So marking this point, I will later use my ruler and draw horizontal lines at this point. So if you're new here, thanks for stopping by, and please consider subscribing. If this video adds any value to you at all, leave a comment in the comment section, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. So now I'll draw horizontal lines at this point that I marked, and so we will not be confused. I will need to label these lines: my chest line, bust point, under bust, half length, and the blouse length. Now, because I have already placed my bust measurement on the chest line, so on my half length, I'll place a quarter of my waist circumference, and then I'll add 1 inch for that allowance, and 1.5 inches for my seam allowance. Now I like to add the seam allowance on this basic block so that when I'm manipulating the darts for the Victorian corset, I'll have space to replace my dart. So that's why I'm doing this. And I like to draft the basic bodies, both the front and the back, at the same time, so that I'll be sure I have 1 inch higher at the shoulder and half inch wider at the arm curve. So going back to placing our measurements on the hip line, I've placed a quarter of my hip circumference and I added seam allowance. So I'll basically connect the dots that I have on the chest line to the half length and then the blouse length. After that, I'll simply cut this out. Cutting it out, I place it on a fresh paper, and I want to draft the back bodies. Remember, I said the back bodies is always 1 inch higher for me. It's always 1 inch higher at the shoulder line and a half inch wider at the arm curve. And that's exactly what I'm observing. Just watch what I'm doing. I simply traced the front the front shoulder line first, and from there I will create the 1 inch higher. Okay, and then going back to the arm curve, I'll simply go to the midpoint and then extend the half inch. For the front panel, we went inwards with half inch. So that half inch is what I will be placing at that midpoint, okay? And then I'll use that to create the arm curve for the back panel. So simply using pattern master, I'll connect the shoulder slope, okay, to that half inch, and then to the bust measurement, okay, something similar to what we did on the front panel. And because this curve couldn't really go as far as the 1 inch I added above the front panel, I had to use the straight part to connect that. So now we have that, and I'll need to mark the back half length. Now when I'm making a full blouse, I use the back half length for the front panel. So that's what I'm replicating on the back panel right now. So that when I'm creating that back half length, I will know the point at which it is. So I'm done with the front panel and the back panel. So I'll simply set the back panel aside and then concentrate on the front panel. Now for the front panel, I will need to first of all place my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Now the nipple to nipple measurement here is 9 inches, and I'm dividing that by 2, and that's 4.5. So I'll mark that for the 4.5, so I will have a straight line. I'll mark it on all the lines that I have, and then I'll create that vertical line. So this nipple to nipple line will become my dart line as well. That's the line which I will manipulate all the darts. Okay, at least for the first part. So when I'm done getting that, I'll move over to the shoulder line. Now you measure what you have left after creating your neckline. And whatever you have, you divide by 2. When you get the midpoint, you will now connect it to meet your bust point. So that's our dart line. And I said we'll be moving dart. So this is the point where we move the dart. I will go to the front center line. Okay. So you decide how you want it. So for this one, I want to use 1.5 inches, and that 1.5 inches unfold will be 3 inches. So when I mark that, I'll go to my bust point, and I'm connecting that to meet the new line. Now I decided to use biro at this point because I didn't want the bold lines to be everywhere. So I'm coming in with the marker now to make all these lines now very sharp. Now the lines that I'll be creating from this point, those are the ones we'll be focusing on. Okay. So now I'll trace the dot line that I have now. So on the new dot line, that's where we'll be doing the manipulation. So I'm canceling that first line now. So I'm moving towards the front center line, and I'm going inwards with half inch. And on the other side that goes towards the side seams, I'm moving 1.5 inches outwards. At the bust point, I went down with half inch. That's because I do not want it to be pointy at that point. So I just want a good blend of curve. So I'm using my pattern master, and I'll connect that point to meet the half inch I marked towards the center front. And then I'll use the curve part again, and I mark the 1.5 inches I marked towards the half inch that I have below the bust point. At the blouse length, I went outwards with 1/4 inch on both sides of this new dart line, and I'm connecting my dart to meet those points. Now I notice if you do not observe this, the inbuilt corset has a way of just sticking out, showing that there's something below the waistline, so it won't look natural. So if you want it to have a good blend, just observe this, take out some inch, and then you have a good blend. So now for my over bust, I measured what I have from my bust point to my under bust, and I measured from my bust point upward. So on the dot line, I went 1 inch outwards on both sides, and I'll be connecting that to the point, to the half inch I have marked above the bust point. So it's not too much, just take your time and you will get it. So after having a good blend, okay, I'm having a good curve, that'll be it. All right. So now I'll go inwards again and blend it. Okay, so that we'll not have any disfigure around that point. So now to have a nice neckline, now remember we'll be using the yoke. I went below the chest line with a half inch. I'll be placing exactly what I have on my chest line, the measurement I have on my chest line. I'll mark them on this new line. So that's the new chest line. So I'll mark a quarter of my bust circumference. On my under bust line, I am placing a quarter of my round under bust. Always remember to measure your round under bust when you're working with your bustier or a corset. So it will be for a proper fit. So I'm replacing the dot that I have there. And on my half length, that's my waistline, I'll place a quarter of my waist circumference, and I'll replace the dot that I have here, which is about 1.5 at that point. I'm replacing that 1.5. Note that I have not added any seam allowance. I like to do that when I'm cutting it on the fabric. So at the blouse length, I am placing a quarter of the hip circumference. So I'll connect what I have on the bust to the under bust, and from the under bust to the waistline, and the waistline to the hip. And then at the far edge there, I'm going up with 1.5 inches, and I'll connect it to meet the blouse length. Okay, so now I will go back to the yoke. Remember, we'll be using the yoke. So to contour the yoke, so on the that line, I'm going on both sides with half inch, and then I'll connect it to meet the shoulder. You don't need to take anything out from the shoulder because it will affect the shoulder measurement. So, so it will not sag. We're just taking out that half inch, and that's our contouring. And then for the neckline, I'll use about half an inch above the bust point. I'll connect it to the first, that leg I have there, and that forms the neckline. And then I'll turn my cuff the other side. Remember the new chest line that we marked around there. So I'll be connecting the second that leg to that new chest line, like so. So that's our neckline now. So for the remaining parts, our Victorian corset now, I will measure on my half length. Whatever I have there, I'll be dividing that into three. Okay, now I want to snatch 6 inches out of the waistline. So I'll divide that into three, and then I will simply draw a straight line at this point to meet the neckline that we have formed and the blouse length. So now on the second dart leg, remember the first dart leg is the one we are done with with that manipulation. So for the snatching now, on the first dart leg, on my half length, I am going on both sides with half inch. That means I'm taking out 1 inch, and on fold, that's 2 inches. So I'll connect the half inch to make the neckline, like inverted triangles, mirror triangles. I'm connecting that to meet the blouse length as well. Note that I left about 1/4 inch for the same purpose. I said I don't want it to stick out. So on the second dart leg, I'm going on both sides with 1/4 inch. So that means half inch, and on fold that will be 1 inch. So 1 inch plus the 2 inches that we took out on the first dart leg, that makes it 3 inches altogether. So I do not need to replace this because already I'm taking out from the waist circumference so that it will snatch some more. So with this, I'll simply shade out the cut out areas. Okay, the parts will be cutting out, and then the next thing we'll simply cut this out, and that'll be it for the front panel. So I'm done cutting, and these are the pieces we have. So I'll need to label this F- front one, two, three, four, and I'll use the arrows so I'll know the direction I'll need to sew this. This will help you a lot because sometimes these pieces can be confusing. So with that, I'm done with the front panel, and we'll move over to the back panel. On the back panel, remember we don't have a zipper allowance. So first off, I'll create the neck weight of 3 inches, 3 inches weight, and about 1 inch depth. So I'll connect that, and I'll extend. I will draw out the back half length that we marked. Okay, so that's it. And on this line, I will mark half of my nipple measurement. We don't really need the nipple, the that manipulation like in the front panel, but I want to use this as a dart leg for me. So a dart line for the back panel. So I will know where the dart will stop. I am extending the chest line, and I will connect this nipple to nipple measurement, half of my nipple to nipple measurement that I marked. I'm connecting it from the chest line to the blouse length. And on both sides of that line, I'm going I'm going outwards with 3/4 inches. Now with this alone, I have already taken out all the darts that I need to snatch out from the back panel. So I'll connect that to meet the chest line, and I'll connect it again to meet the blouse length. And on both sides, I am going outwards with 1/4 inch, and I'll connect that to meet the darts, that intake there. Normally, I take out 1 inch at my back center line. That's for the back indentation, so it will give a good fit. And I'm taking that out, and I'm measuring about 2.5 inches from my chest line upward. Working with the dart leg I have there, I'll cuff it to meet that point. And because I want to contour the back yoke, I am going upwards from the chest line. I'm going upwards with half inch, and I'm connecting that to meet the arm curve like so. So it means I'll be cutting at that point, that keyhole for the yoke, and those are the areas, the shaded areas I am cutting out. So now remember, on the front panel we added 1.5 inches for the seam allowance. So I'll be taking that out because if I leave it in there, it will, make it too much, and at the end of the day we'll not have any snatching anywhere. So I am gonna take that out, 1.5 inches everywhere, and that's it for the back panel. So now I am taking that out. That's because I drafted the same thing as the front panel. And on the front panel, I like to add all the allowances I need because I do not want to be patching papers when I am trying to manipulate the dart or replacing them. So that's why, and I like to use the front, to cut the back because I want it to be 1 inch higher at the shoulder and half inch wider at the arm curve. It makes it easier for me that way to contend with all of this. So now we are done. We are done with the back, and you will need to label this: the back yoke, the the middle back, the middle back, and the side back. So when I'm done labeling, I will cut it on the fabric and I will add all the seam allowance I need. If you want to see the sewing part of this video, please stick around, subscribe, and I'll see you in the sewing video.